Growing up, I was surrounded by the expectations of my family and society. Everyone around me believed there were only three choices in life: become a doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. My family made this very clear, and I felt the weight of what they wanted for me. From an early age, I knew every decision I made had to fit within these expectations. Otherwise, I would be considered a failure. There was no room for deviation, no space for exploring my own dreams. The pressure was immense, and it felt as though my identity was being shaped entirely by others. Throughout my school years, I excelled academically, partly because I wanted to live up to these expectations, and partly because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. I studied hard, got good grades, and did everything that was expected of me. My friends all seemed to be on the same path, studying to become professionals who would eventually secure high-paying jobs and lead stable lives. There was an unspoken understanding that this was the only acceptable way to live. Anything else was seen as a failure, a deviation from the norm. When I reached adulthood, I received 2 highly attractive job offers from prestigious companies right after graduating from business school. On paper, it seemed like I had achieved everything my family wanted for me. I was on the verge of stepping into a life that would provide stability, financial security, and the respect of my peers. But deep down, I felt empty. I knew that if I accepted one of these jobs, I would be doing it for everyone else. For my parents, my relatives, my friends, but not for myself. I had always been a people pleaser, someone who sought validation from others, but the thought of spending the rest of my life living up to someone else's expectations filled me with dread. Instead of accepting these job offers and stepping into the stable life my family desired, I chose a completely different path. I decided to become a monk. It was like committing career suicide, giving up everything to seek something more meaningful in my life. It wasn't an easy decision, and it certainly wasn't one that my family supported. They were shocked, disappointed, and even angry. They couldn't understand why I would throw away such promising opportunities to pursue something so unconventional. To them, it seemed like I was making a huge mistake, one that I would regret for the rest of my life. I shaved my head, donned the robes, and moved into a monastery. I lived there for 3 years, completely detaching myself from the material world and the expectations that had been placed on me for so long. The life of a monk was far from easy. We had no modern comforts. Everything was simple and austere. I lived in a small room with nothing but a thin mat and a few essential items. My days were filled with meditation, study, and service. I woke up before dawn, spent hours in silent meditation, and worked alongside my fellow monks to maintain the monastery. There was no internet, no television, no distractions from the outside world. It was just me, my thoughts, and the quiet surroundings of the monastery. The simplicity of monastic life allowed me to reflect deeply on who I was and what I wanted out of life. It was a stark contrast to the fast-paced, achievement-oriented lifestyle I had known before. In the monastery, there was no competition, no race to be the best, no pressure to prove myself to anyone. I was free to explore my inner self, to question my beliefs and values, and to find my own path. It was a process of unlearning everything I had been taught about success and happiness. I learned that true fulfillment doesn't come from external achievements or the approval of others. It comes from within. During that time, I also learned to let go of the preconceived notions and societal expectations that had been imposed on me. Many people told me I would never find a job when I returned to normal life. They thought I was doing something strange, and that no one would want to hire someone who had lived as a monk. They even said no girl would want to talk to me, that I would always be seen as odd. But the amazing thing was, after no longer being a monk, I found myself in one of the most incredible periods of my life. The fears that others had projected onto me never materialized. In fact, the opposite happened. I felt more confident, more at peace, and more capable of handling whatever life threw at me. Living as a monk taught me the importance of mindfulness and presence. In the monastery, every action was done with intention, whether it was sweeping the floor, washing dishes, or simply breathing. I learned to appreciate the beauty of the present moment, to find joy in the simple things, and to let go of the constant need for more. I realized that much of the stress and anxiety I had experienced before came from always striving for something that was just out of reach, a better job, more money, more recognition. But in the monastery, I learned that happiness isn't something you chase, it's something you cultivate within yourself. The experience of living as a monk instilled values in me that I could never have learned from any job or book. It taught me how to distance myself from the noise and expectations of others, to focus on becoming the person I truly wanted to be. It taught me how to think about life in a different way, one that wasn't defined by external measures of success. Instead, I learned to measure my life by the depth of my understanding and the impact I could make in the world. I realized that true success is not about how much money you make or how prestigious your job is. It's about how much you grow as a person, how much you contribute to the lives of others, and how true you are to yourself. When I finally left the monastery after 3 years, I returned to the world with a completely different perspective. I no longer felt the need to conform to the expectations that had once weighed so heavily on me. I was no longer afraid of being judged or labeled a failure. I knew who I was, and I knew what I wanted out of life. I wanted to live authentically, to pursue my passions, and to make a positive difference in the world. The time I spent as a monk gave me the clarity and courage to do just that. Today I am grateful for the journey I took. It wasn't easy, and there were many moments of doubt and fear along the way. But in the end, it was worth it. Becoming a monk allowed me to break free from the expectations that had confined me for so long and to discover who I truly am. It taught me that life is not about fitting into a predetermined mold. It's about creating your own path, following your own heart, and living in a way that is true to yourself. And that, to me, is the greatest success of all. When I think back to my first year in college, I remember being head over heels in love with my high school sweetheart. We were inseparable, the kind of couple that people would jokingly roll their eyes at because we were always together. We had planned everything. We signed up for classes together, shared a U-Haul when moving to campus, lived in the same dorm, and walked to every class side by side. It felt like we were destined to be together forever, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. Everything changed halfway through that first year. One night, she discovered beer and other boys, both on the same night. She cheated on me, and my entire world came crashing down. I was devastated. I felt betrayed, lost, and utterly alone. It was as if everything that had brought me joy suddenly turned to dust. I stopped going to class, stopped eating properly, and stopped caring about anything. I couldn't muster the energy to get out of bed most days. Life lost all its color and meaning. In the midst of all this pain, I found solace in an unexpected place: reading. Even though I had lost interest in almost everything else, I kept reading. It was the one thing that kept me grounded. One day, while flipping through the school newspaper, something caught my eye. It was an advertisement for summer jobs in the Dominican Republic. The ad showed a picture of a perfect white sandy beach, turquoise water, and a big green palm tree. The caption read, "Escape! Students needed for summertime jobs in the Dominican Republic." Without giving it much thought, I decided I needed to get away, to escape the pain that was suffocating me. I applied for the job, and soon enough, I was on my way to the Dominican Republic. That summer turned out to be a turning point in my life. I remember one particular night vividly. My friend Kevin and I had just dropped off a client, and we decided to take a drive. We were speeding down a winding road at 85 miles an hour, the warm Caribbean air rushing in through the open windows. It felt exhilarating, like I was finally free from everything that had been weighing me down. But then, as we approached a sharp corner, everything changed. Kevin grabbed the wheel, shouted, "Hold on," and the car began to slide. In that split second, time seemed to slow down. The car skidded, and before I knew it, we crashed. When I came to, I looked over at Kevin. He was screaming at the top of his lungs, his head bleeding profusely. He yelled at me to get out of the car. Somehow, I managed to pull myself out through the shattered windshield. I stood up, dazed, and looked around. Blood was dripping down my body, and I could barely comprehend what had just happened. In that moment, I found myself asking, did I even matter? Images from my life started flashing before me. Moments with friends, family, celebrations, and laughter. I realized that, up until that point, I had been living without truly appreciating the people around me or the experiences I'd had. As I stood there, surrounded by the wreckage, I saw a glimmer, a reflection of the moon in the blood on the hood of the car. I looked up, and there it was, a bright, beautiful full moon. In that moment, I felt an inexplicable sense of peace wash over me. It was as if the universe was telling me that everything was going to be okay, that I still had a chance to make something of my life. I felt as though I had been handed a second chance, a golden ticket, if you will. I realized that I was still alive, that I could still love, still matter, and that I needed to make the most of whatever time I had left. That accident changed me. It made me realize that I had been wasting my life, wallowing in self-pity and regret. I had been so focused on the pain of losing my girlfriend that I had forgotten all the other beautiful things in my life. I had forgotten to live, to love, and to appreciate the people who cared about me. The accident gave me a new perspective, a sense of mortality motivation, as I like to call it. I realized that life is fragile, that it can be taken away in an instant, and that I needed to make every moment count. When I returned from the Dominican Republic, I was a different person. I had a renewed sense of purpose, a desire to live fully and authentically. I no longer wanted to be defined by my heartbreak or by what had happened to me. Instead, I wanted to be defined by how I responded to it, by how I chose to move forward. I started to focus on the things that truly mattered to me, my passions, my dreams, and the people who had always been there for me. I reconnected with friends, started taking better care of myself, and threw myself into my studies with a newfound enthusiasm. The experience also taught me the importance of vulnerability. For so long, I had built walls around myself, trying to protect myself from getting hurt again. But in doing so, I had also shut myself off from the people who cared about me. I realized that true strength comes not from hiding your pain, but from sharing it, from allowing yourself to be seen, flaws and all. It's in those moments of vulnerability that real connections are made, that real healing happens. Looking back now, I can see that the heartbreak I experienced in college was a blessing in disguise. It forced me to confront my fears, to question who I was and what I wanted out of life. It pushed me to take risks, to step outside of my comfort zone, and to discover parts of myself that I never knew existed. It taught me that pain is a part of life, but it doesn't have to define us. We have the power to choose how we respond to it, to let it break us or to let it make us stronger. Today, I am grateful for that painful chapter in my life. It taught me resilience, compassion, and the importance of living with intention. It showed me that even in our darkest moments, there is light to be found, lessons to be learned, and growth to be achieved. And most importantly, it taught me that I am capable of overcoming anything, as long as I have the courage to face it head on and the willingness to keep moving forward. I had always been ambitious, driven by a deep desire to succeed. Growing up, I was constantly reminded of the importance of financial security. I was the kid who dreamed big, imagining myself as a millionaire, living a life of luxury and comfort. My family wasn't wealthy, but I made a promise to myself that one day I would be. I would be the one to break the cycle of financial struggle and make something remarkable of my life. After college, I landed a job working with two successful entrepreneurs who were just starting a technology company. They were bodybuilders as well as business owners, and they were looking for someone to help them with copywriting. I didn't know much about technology, and I had no experience in the fitness industry, but I was young, eager, and willing to learn. So, I took a leap of faith and joined them, moving into a small office filled with servers and computer equipment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. From the very beginning, I threw myself into the work. I wanted to prove myself, to show that I was capable of succeeding in this fast-paced, competitive environment. I worked long hours, often staying late into the night. I became obsessed with the idea of success, working tirelessly, sacrificing sleep, social life, and even my health in pursuit of my goal. I told myself that it would all be worth it in the end, that all the suffering and sacrifice would lead to something great. Years went by, and the company began to grow. We started to gain traction, and soon we were making more money than I had ever imagined. I had everything I thought I wanted: financial stability, respect, and a growing business that was thriving. But despite all of this, I felt empty. I was living the cliché: money can't buy happiness. No matter how much we achieved, it never seemed to be enough. I kept thinking that if I just worked a little harder, if we just made a little more money, I would finally feel fulfilled. But that feeling never came. I realized that I had been asking myself the wrong questions. For years, I had been focused on how to get rich, how to accumulate wealth, and how to be successful in the eyes of others. But I had never stopped to ask myself why I wanted these things. What was the purpose behind it all? What did I truly want out of life? I found myself at a breaking point. I was exhausted, burnt out, and miserable. I had spent years chasing a dream that no longer felt meaningful, and I knew I needed a change. One day, I decided to walk away. I told my business partners that I was done, that I couldn't keep living this way. It was one of the hardest decisions I had ever made, but it was also the most liberating. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I felt like I was finally free to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, free from the pressures of money and success. As I took time to reflect on what truly mattered to me, I thought about my family, specifically my mother and sister, who had struggled with their weight for most of their lives. I remembered my uncle, who had passed away when I was just 12 years old, having eaten himself to death. I thought about the millions of people around the world who were struggling with the same issues. People who were trapped in a cycle of poor health and emotional pain, just like my family had been. And in that moment, I realized what I wanted to do. I wanted to help. I wanted to create something that would make a real difference in people's lives. In 2010, just as the world was beginning to recover from the Great Recession, I co-founded a new company, Quest Nutrition. It wasn't about making money, it was about solving a problem. I wanted to help people lead healthier lives, to give them the tools they needed to take control of their health and well-being. We started small, making protein bars in a kitchen, testing different recipes, and figuring out how to create a product that people would love. It was a completely different experience from the world of technology startups. Instead of focusing on how to maximize profit, we were focused on how to create real value, how to make a positive impact. We set up our first facility in Compton, California, and hired people from the local community. Many of our employees were former gang members, ex-drug dealers, and individuals with criminal records, people who had been written off by society, much like I had written myself off when I realized my old dream was no longer fulfilling. I didn't care about their pasts. I only cared about their willingness to work hard and change their lives. We gave them a chance, and in return, they helped us build something incredible. The early days of Quest were tough. We were working long hours in a makeshift kitchen, making each bar by hand, packing them ourselves, and shipping them out. It was physically exhausting, and there were times when we doubted whether we could make it work. But despite the challenges, there was a sense of purpose that drove us forward. A sense that we were doing something meaningful, something that could change lives. Slowly but surely, Quest Nutrition began to grow. People loved our products, and our message of health and empowerment resonated with them. We were no longer just selling protein bars. We were building a community, a movement of people who wanted to live healthier, happier lives. And as the company grew, I found myself growing as well. I was no longer driven by the need to prove myself or to accumulate wealth. Instead, I was driven by a desire to make a difference, to contribute something positive to the world. Through this journey, I learned that true success is not about how much money you make or how many accolades you receive. True success is about living a life that is aligned with your values, about finding work that is meaningful and fulfilling, and about making a positive impact on the lives of others. I learned that the questions we ask ourselves are crucial. They determine the path we take and the choices we make. When I changed my question from how can I get rich to how can I make a difference, everything in my life changed. Today, I look back on my journey with gratitude. The years I spent chasing wealth taught me important lessons about what really matters in life. They taught me that the pursuit of money without a deeper sense of purpose is ultimately empty. But they also led me to where I am today, a place where I am able to use my skills, my resources, and my experiences to help others. And that, to me, is the true definition of success. The story of becoming an entrepreneur was not just about building a business. It was about building a life that I could be proud of. It was about understanding that our greatest challenges can become our greatest opportunities for growth, and that true fulfillment comes not from what we have, but from what we give. It was a journey from wealth to purpose, and it was the most rewarding journey of my life. My journey as a teacher began with high hopes and big dreams. I imagined myself inspiring young minds, making a real difference in my students' lives, and being the kind of teacher who would be remembered long after they left my classroom. And for a while, it seemed like everything was going exactly as I had envisioned. My first year of teaching was magical. I had a wonderful group of students who were eager to learn, and I felt like I was truly making an impact. I would leave school each day feeling fulfilled and grateful for the opportunity to do work that mattered. But everything changed during my second year. That year, I was assigned a class with 5 boys who were labeled as incorrigible. They were disruptive, defiant, and seemed determined to challenge me at every turn. One student, in particular, stood out. He was impossible to manage. He would constantly cause disturbances, refuse to participate, and make it nearly impossible for me to teach. I found myself dreading going to work each day, my enthusiasm replaced by frustration and exhaustion. I tried everything I could think of, different teaching strategies, rewards, consequences, but nothing seemed to work. I felt like I was failing, both as a teacher and as a person. One day, the situation reached a breaking point. This student was standing in the doorway of the classroom, kicking the door frame, making loud noises, and refusing to come inside. I could feel my pace slipping away, and before I knew it, I was walking towards him with the intention of physically forcing him to stop. I am ashamed to admit it now, but in that moment, I wanted to kick him out of sheer frustration. Thankfully, he ran away before I could do anything, and I was left standing there, shaken and horrified by my own reaction. I knew I couldn't continue like this. I needed help. I went to the principal's office that day and told him that I couldn't do it anymore. I said, "It's him or me." The principal decided to remove the student from my class, and while I should have felt relieved, I felt terrible. I felt like I had failed him, like I had given up on a child who needed me the most. I confided in 2 of my colleagues, pouring out my heart and admitting how lost I felt. They listened, and then they said something that changed everything for me. "You are not the key to every door." It was a simple statement, but it struck me deeply. I realized that I had been putting immense pressure on myself to be perfect, to have all the answers, and to solve every problem. I thought I had to be the key to every door, but that was impossible. That conversation marked a turning point for me. Instead of seeing my students' behavior as a personal failure, I began to see it as an opportunity for growth, for both them and myself. I decided that I wanted to be the kind of teacher who would never give up on a student, no matter how challenging they were. I started seeking out the students who were struggling the most, the ones who were the hardest to reach, and I made it my mission to connect with them. I read every book I could find on classroom management, behavior modification, and the psychology of troubled children. I started experimenting with new strategies, keeping detailed notes on what worked and what didn't. Slowly but surely, things began to change. I started to see glimpses of progress in my students. The boy who had once been impossible to manage began to open up, to trust me, and to participate in class. It wasn't easy, and there were still many difficult days, but I could see that my efforts were making a difference. I realized that these students didn't need a teacher who was perfect. They needed someone who was willing to show up for them, day after day, even when things were hard. They needed someone who believed in them, even when they didn't believe in themselves. As the years went by, I continued to grow as a teacher. I learned that the key to reaching my students was not through force or control, but through empathy, patience, and understanding. I learned to see beyond their behavior, to understand the pain and fear that often lay beneath the surface. I began to see my role not just as an educator, but as a guide, a mentor, and a source of stability in their lives. I realized that many of my students were dealing with challenges that I could never have imagined. Poverty, trauma, broken homes, and that their behavior was often a reflection of the struggles they were facing outside of school. One of the most profound moments of my career came several years later. By then, I had become known as the teacher who could handle the difficult kids. Whenever there was a student who no one else could reach, they were sent to my class. One day, I was given a new student, a boy who had been expelled from multiple schools and was known for his aggressive behavior. When he first walked into my classroom, I could see the anger and defiance in his eyes. He was ready for a fight, ready to be rejected once again. But instead of reacting with fear or frustration, I greeted him with a smile and said, "I'm glad you're here. Let's figure this out together." It wasn't easy, and there were many days when I wondered if I was making any progress at all. But slowly, the walls he had built around himself began to come down. He started participating in class, opening up about his life, and even helping other students. By the end of the year, he was a different person, still rough around the edges, but kinder, more engaged, and more hopeful. On the last day of school, he handed me a note. It simply said, "Thank you for not giving up on me. No one ever has." I still carry that note with me to this day, a reminder of why I do what I do. Teaching has been the most challenging and rewarding journey of my life. It has taught me that true success is not about having all the answers or being the perfect teacher. True success is about showing up day after day with an open heart and a willingness to learn. It's about seeing the potential in every child, even when they can't see it themselves. It's about being the key to as many doors as you can, and knowing that sometimes just being there is enough. The story of finding my purpose as a teacher was not just about helping my students. It was about transforming myself. It was about learning to let go of my need for control, to embrace vulnerability, and to see every challenge as an opportunity for growth. It was about understanding that the greatest impact we can have is not through our words or our lessons, but through our love, our patience, and our unwavering belief in the potential of every child. And that, to me, is the true purpose of teaching. There are moments in life that define who we are, moments that test our courage, our character, and our commitment to others. One of the most powerful examples of such a moment came from a man named Mike Mansour, a Navy SEAL who made the ultimate sacrifice for his brothers in arms. His story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power of selflessness, and the true meaning of brotherhood. Mike Mansour was part of an elite group of warriors, trained to handle the most dangerous and challenging missions. The SEALs are known for their resilience, their ability to adapt to any situation, and their unwavering commitment to their team. For Mike, being a SEAL was not just about serving his country. It was about protecting the men beside him, no matter the cost. He understood that his role as a Navy SEAL required him to be willing to put his life on the line, and he was prepared to do just that. On the day that would define his legacy, Mike and his team were positioned on a rooftop, providing overwatch for a group of fellow soldiers who were maneuvering through a dangerous area. They had been engaged in a firefight, and tensions were high. Suddenly, without warning, an insurgent managed to approach the building and threw a grenade onto the rooftop where Mike and his teammates were stationed. The grenade bounced off Mike's chest and landed on the ground. In that split second, Mike had a choice. He could jump away, saving himself, or he could act to save his team. There was a stairwell right next to Mike. All he had to do was jump down, and he would be safe. But that would mean leaving his brothers exposed to the blast. Without hesitation, Mike chose to act. He yelled a warning to his teammates and then threw himself onto the grenade, absorbing the full force of the explosion. The blast was devastating, and Mike was gravely injured. Despite the severity of his wounds, he held on for 35 minutes before succumbing to his injuries. His actions saved the lives of the men around him. His brothers were able to return home to their families because of his selfless sacrifice. The impact of Mike's sacrifice was profound. His teammates were forever changed by what he did for them. They knew that they were alive because of his bravery, and they carried the weight of his sacrifice with them every day. Mike's story became a symbol of the bond that exists between those who serve together, a bond that goes beyond friendship, beyond camaraderie. It is a bond forged in the crucible of shared hardship, a bond that is strengthened by the knowledge that each member of the team is willing to lay down their life for the others. For those who knew Mike, his actions that day were not surprising. He had always been the kind of person who put others first, who cared deeply about the well-being of his friends and family. He was known for his kindness, his sense of humor, and his unwavering dedication to his team. His sacrifice was the ultimate expression of who he was, a man who lived his life with purpose, who understood the value of service, and who was willing to give everything for the people he loved. Mike's story is a reminder of the power of selflessness, of the incredible strength that comes from putting others before ourselves. It is a reminder that true heroism is not about seeking glory or recognition. It is about doing what is right, even when it comes at the highest cost. His actions that day were not driven by a desire for accolades or praise. He acted out of love, out of a deep sense of duty to his brothers, and out of an understanding that their lives were worth more than his own. In the years since Mike's death, his legacy has lived on. His story has been told and retold, inspiring countless people to live with greater courage, to be more selfless, and to strive to make a positive impact on the lives of those around them. His sacrifice has become a beacon of hope, a symbol of what it means to truly care for others. For those who serve in the military, Mike's story is a powerful reminder of the commitment they have made to their fellow soldiers, and of the sacrifices that are sometimes required to honor that commitment. The story of Mike Mansour is not just a story about war, it is a story about love, about courage, and about the incredible capacity of the human spirit to rise above fear and act with compassion. It is a story that reminds us of the best of humanity, of the qualities that define us at our core. In a world that can often feel divided and disconnected, Mike's story is a powerful reminder of the importance of connection, of community, and of the willingness to put others before ourselves.